He and his work have been featured on Newsweek, Fox News, and Newsmax, and derided by CNN and the New York Times as, quote, dangerous disinformation under the guise of satire. He is the author of several books, including the international bestseller, The Babylon Bee Guide to Wokeness, and the best-selling sci-fi fantasy novel, The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. Joel lives in Toledo with his wife, Kelsey, and their 5 children. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Joel Berry.
All right. Well, the pressure's on. I'm worth $4,800 apparently. You'll just have to give me time to come up with $4,800 worth of jokes before our dinner, and I will come and mow your lawn too if you'd like. Throw that in. But I'm really honored and privileged to be here. I am so thankful for NOCA. I am so thankful for what NOCA has done for my family, for my kids. I have 4 kids at NOCA who are smart, beautiful, and extremely well-behaved children. And Mr. Nestor, if you're in here, I'm sorry that my son forgot his detention on Thursday. He will make it up on Monday, I'm told, so we'll take care of that. But thank you for having me. My wife would also like to thank you because this is the best dressed I've been in 2 years. But yeah, I run a satire site called the Babylon Bee. I know a lot of you are familiar with it. I know some of you probably are not. But we are a conservative Christian comedy site, which is a wild thing to say. I mean, it's something that a lot of people, I think, never thought would ever exist. But we write fake news. It's all fake, just getting that out there right now. None of our headlines are actually real. But we publish kind of dry AP-style news that you might see, similar to what The Onion did back in the day, but we do it from a very different perspective in terms of our worldview and our politics. In 1908, the great English writer G.K. Chesterton said, "Satire has weakened in our age for several reasons, but chiefly, I think, because the world has become too absurd to be satirized." That was in 1908, and here we are in 2024, and the challenge that we have as writers at the Bee is trying to write things that are more absurd than what you see in the real news every day. But just to kind of give you an idea of what we do, to just kind of see some of our work here, I have some up on the screen. As you're scrolling through our news feed every morning on your phone or on your computer, you might come across headlines like this. "Okay, take us to a different leader," say exasperated aliens after trying to communicate with Joe Biden. But we cover politics. We also cover Christian culture, things that we might all be familiar with as churchgoers, things like this. "Man dies of old age in church parking lot after waiting 60 years for wife to finish socializing." Another thing that's important for us as very serious journalists at the Babylon Bee is we want to be fair. We want to make fun of both sides, hit everyone equally. You might find news like this sometimes where we make fun of Congress members to wear barcodes so lobbyists can scan prices and self-checkout. And if you're like me, I was an evangelical 90s kid, so I'm very familiar with VeggieTales. Some of you might be familiar with VeggieTales. Times have changed. VeggieTales isn't quite what it used to be. Thanks to new laws, VeggieTales finally introduces new cannabis character. That's Cannabis Carl there. And we tackle serious news as well, serious issues in the culture, things that we see in our educational system, like this headline here: "Shuttered adult bookstores cite fierce competition from public school libraries." Another reason I'm very thankful for NOCA, I don't have to worry about what's in their library. And this last one here, you might remember a couple years ago in 2020, wearing masks were a pretty big deal. Thank God they're not anymore. Biden cuts hole in masks so he can still sniff people's hair. You missed that one, but yeah. There you go. There he is. Now, my job is one of the most fun jobs in the world. I can't believe I get to do what I do every day. But there's a serious side to what we do. You know, we're not just here to make people laugh. We're here to speak truth. I think in our own small, kind of silly way, we're trying to shine a light on what I call a post-truth culture. We're trying to help save this birthright of freedom we've been given here in America, and we're doing that by poking at the lies and the idols that seek to tear it down. In a way that's not too different from the mission of classical education. We want to raise children who are equipped to shine that light, even in times of darkness. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about kind of how we got here culturally and what we can do to prepare our children for the world they're growing up in, and talk a little bit about what comes next. And I'll sprinkle a few more Babylon Bee jokes in there as well. Before I wrote stupid jokes on the internet, I was in the Marine Corps Infantry. I had been raised in a Christian home. I had been homeschooled by two loving parents. I had been taught right from wrong, and I had no idea how blessed I was. I had no idea how exceptional and amazing Western culture and American freedom really are. Because it was the water I'd been swimming in my entire life. I think most of us can relate. And that all changed when I touched down in Fallujah, Iraq in the summer of 2006 and spent a year in a nation, a culture, and among a people who didn't have the same inheritance that I did. I saw the death, revenge killings, deception, lawlessness, and hopelessness of that world. I saw the contrast. And I came back with a real zeal to preserve that birthright and renew it for a new generation. Now, I make no apologies when I say that Western civilization gave us the greatest culture the world has ever seen. And that's not because we're better people. It's nothing to do with our DNA. It's because of our ideas. It started with the Old Testament, and then the teachings of Jesus and the reasoning of the Greeks, and over 2,000 years through turmoil, upheaval, atrocity, and constant devotion, it gave us virtually all of the understandings of human dignity, natural rights, and freedom that we take for granted today. It gave us the scientific method and philosophy to help us seek out the true, theology and ethics to help us know the good, and art that uplifts the soul with the beautiful, giving us a peek outside the dreary four walls of the material world, a glimpse at the transcendent, which is what all human beings were created for. And that's why for centuries there have been educators, like many of you in this room, working to preserve these ideas and values in the next generation. Children are taught to read good books and learn about the great men and women of history. They are taught virtue, not just virtue signaling. They are taught how to think rather than what to think. Or, like me, you take a shortcut and just read the Bible a whole lot. And when you do, you find out that it all came from the Bible. Everything that came after just points back to it. But today we look around us and what do we see? We see these values that we hold dear are under attack. At some point in recent history, philosophers, scientists, world leaders, and most importantly, academics and educators decided that the values of the West were holding human beings back, that it was time to shed our 2,000-year-old heritage and try something new. Darwin introduced the idea that human beings were not persons made in the image of a divine creator, but rather highly evolved animals that came about through a completely undirected natural process. Nietzsche announced the death of God and deduced that as a result, all belief in objective, universal truth, goodness, and beauty was nonsense. Karl Marx attempted to explain the existence not as a real fight between good and evil, but as a never-ending power struggle between the oppressed and the oppressors. He believed the key to human happiness was the abolishment of faith altogether. And there were a bunch of French philosophers in there with terrible ideas, and I'm not going to try to pronounce all their names. The point is, we began untethering ourselves from our cultural and religious heritage. We began to reject everything. Our culture and pride decided to abandon the natural law and divine revelation and build our own moral system from scratch. And when you look around, you see the results. Now, we have men who take hormones and put on a dress and call themselves women. We have women who kill their own children and call it reproductive health care. We have political appointees telling us that science is determined by committee and consensus rather than the scientific method. We have postmodern sculptures telling us that the monstrosity on the floor in front of us is actually art. Pride is extolled as a virtue. Narcissism is treated as empowerment. And autonomy trumps virtue. That's where we are today. And it's a familiar place because we are reliving the moment when the angel Lucifer said to himself, "I will not allow my Creator to define who I am and what I should do. I will be my own God. I will be like the Most High." This is what I mean when I talk about a post-truth culture. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, this speech is kind of a bummer. I thought this guy was supposed to be funny. But that's the thing. You know, comedians kind of have twisted senses of humor a lot of times, and in a very funny way, or a weird way, I guess. This stuff is funny to me, and I'll explain what I mean. There's something funny about created human beings who were created for a certain purpose, to live a certain way by the one who created them. Just throw all that off and say, "Nah, I'll do my own thing. I'm good. I'll build my own utopia," and then 2 minutes later, creating hell on earth. To me, it harkens back to one of the classic comedy bits, the pratfall. You see it in all the great slapstick comedies. I myself grew up with the Three Stooges as a man of high culture. I love the Three Stooges. But in these bits, you usually see a proud, well-dressed man. He might be wearing a nice suit. He's wearing a hat. He's got a briefcase, walking down a sidewalk. And then he slips on a banana peel, or he runs headfirst into a pole, or he falls face first into a pie. In our culture, with our proud rejection of natural law and divine revelation, has slipped on a banana peel, bounced off a pole, and fallen face first into a pie. And in a way, that's really, really funny. So that's where we are. The question is, how does classical education help us? What can we as parents and educators do? A few weeks ago, I was being interviewed on a show, and after a long, interesting discussion with the host, he asked me a question that I've heard many times in many interviews, and it went something like this. "So what's next? What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think there's hope for us to turn this around? What do you think we need to do to turn this around?" I hear that a lot. I think the main reason I get asked this is because many parents are scared to death when they think of the world their kids are going to grow up in. I think it's a feeling many of us can relate to. But I think the other reason people ask me this question is because the Babylon Bee has gained a weird reputation for being strangely accurate at predicting the future. We don't intend for our headlines to come true, but a lot of them do. And it became such a common phenomenon that our writers and our editors created a spreadsheet to start keeping track of what we now call fulfilled prophecies of the Babylon Bee. I want to give you a few examples of these so you can just kind of get a sense for what I'm talking about. In 2021, we wrote this headline: "Study finds anyone still wearing a mask at this point is probably just super ugly." And sure enough, I think in 2023, a study says people who think themselves unattractive are more likely to keep wearing masks. In 2022, we wrote this headline: "Fetterman abides by Senate dress code with new formal hoodie." And what do you know? A few months later, he actually did it. Showed up at a DC dinner wearing his formal tuxedo hoodie. This one was good. I wrote this headline thinking there's no way, this is too absurd. No way this will come true. To improve public perception, Kamala Harris taking likability lessons from Hillary Clinton. No way that's going to come true, right? Later on in the year, White House asks Hillary staffers how to make Kamala more likable. In 2021, oops, AP reporter forgets to remove Hamas headband before going live. This is actually kind of a heavy one. October 7th massacre, they had actual AP journalists embedded with Hamas during the attack. We have an op-ed writer who works for the Bee, a fictional op-ed writer. He's a leftist writer. His name's Garth Strudelfud. And he wrote this headline, "Citizens being able to vote the ruling party out of power is the end of democracy." And what do you know? In the New York Times, 2023, elections are bad for democracy. 2021, Gavin Newsom named U-Haul Salesperson of the Year. And yes, this came true. Californians fleeing for Texas so fast U-Haul runs out of trucks for them. So what I hope to do tonight is answer those two questions of what can we do and what's next, to the best of my ability, drawing from my expertise as a modern-day mystic prophet, and most importantly, an imperfect father. Part of the answer to the question of what we can do is obvious. It's being exemplified by the people who are in this room. Educators, parents, financial supporters, all of you here, you are rebels. You're waging warfare against the spirit of the age and preparing our posterity to carry the torch to future generations. The key here in all of this is our children. The battle being waged is not just for our souls, but for the souls of our kids. So here in the time I have left, I want to quickly give you just a few pointers for what we as parents and educators can do to support this important work. The first is something I've learned, I have 5 kids now, I've learned the hard way in many ways, is to be an example. If you want your children to be students of the true, the good, and the beautiful, you need to become a student yourself. And if you're like me, a lot of us skimmed over our readings in high school and college. I wasn't a very good reader, and I'm trying to make amends for that now. It's not enough just to find a great school and simply drop our kids off, hoping our teachers will do the rest. Because it's not just about where they're educated, it's about what we say. Or it's not about what we say. Kids are most influenced by what we do. You can tell your kids about your values, but your kids will watch the way you live and will quickly determine what your values really are. So read the good books. Dust off those things that you were supposed to read in high school that you just skimmed over. Read Dickens, Dostoevsky, Plato, Jane Austen, and of course, the Bible. Interact with your children and what they're learning. Is your kid going through a book at school? Read it with him. Is she learning about a historical event? Watch a movie or documentary about it together and then talk about it. And most importantly, don't be afraid of your kids' questions, because they will ask you things that will stump you. And it's important in those moments, do not panic. And don't just pull some fake answer out to try to appease them. Learn together. Search out the truth with them. Find the answer with them. And then stay close to God. If you don't have a relationship with God, consider forming one, because God is the source of it all. He is the source of truth, goodness, and beauty, because he is truth, goodness, and beauty. Draw near to God and invite your children to come with you. So be an example. That's the first one. The second thing is to stand on that truth. It's not enough just to know the truth. You have to stand on it. There are many people today who know what's right and wrong. They know what's true, but it's something entirely different to stand up for that truth, especially when it might cost you your reputation, a promotion, a friendship, or your job. The reason lies are getting so much traction in today's culture is because people don't know, or is not because people don't know the truth. Many people do. It's because they're afraid to stand up for it. The Babylon Bee has had these moments in our history where we've kind of had to make decisions, where we've come under attack by big tech, journalism, even the government has waged attacks on us. The New York Times, Washington Post, Rolling Stones, they've written hit pieces on us. So there have been coordinated efforts to silence and censor us on social media. But perhaps most hilariously, we get fact-checked all the time. And these are really funny. This was kind of the first time that we started to sense that there was something bigger going on than just us telling jokes on the internet. A few years ago, Facebook entered into a relationship with a fact-checking company called Snopes. And we were just doing our thing, telling our jokes, putting them online. And we got a letter one day from Facebook saying that we are going to demonetize your site, and if there's one more violation, we're going to take you off our site completely because you are sharing fake news, because you've been fact-checked. And they cited one of our stories that Snopes had found, and they had written a 4-page fact check in which they cited several sources proving that we had shared some fake news. And this was the story. CNN purchases industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news before publication. Yeah. And that's when we kind of started to think, okay, there's something going on here. We're facing some opposition. People don't like what we have to say. But it didn't stop there. The nefarious thing about it was that these fact checks then get fed back into social media algorithms, and they use that to suppress your traffic on their site. So the fact checks kept coming. This story here was one that was fact checked. Ninth Circuit Court overturns death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I love this one because like a lawyer wrote it, and they cited all this case law to prove that the court can't actually overturn somebody's death. I love it when they put so much work into these fact checks. It's just great. You might remember the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the kind of disastrous withdrawal when the Taliban took over overnight. We ran this story that got fact-checked by, I think, Newsweek. CNN praises Taliban for wearing masks during attack. It's funny because you can see CNN doing something like this, right? This is the last one here. This is also fact-checked. Ocasio-Cortez appears on The Price is Right, guesses everything is free. And I love this one too because the fact checker actually dug through the archives of the Price is Right footage and found this exact episode to prove that Ocasio-Cortez wasn't actually there. I mean, they go all out for these things. I just love to think that someone is spending all their days and nights just fact-checking jokes. But then the attacks started to step up a little bit more. They got a little bit more serious. They got to the point where they were actually threatening our business, threatening our livelihoods. And the most high-profile one that some of you might be aware of is when we told a joke on Twitter that Twitter said went against their terms of service, and they suspended us. They suspended our account. This came one morning. My editor-in-chief texted me, and he said, traffic's been a little light the last couple of days. Let's come up with some good stuff and try to get the traffic going again. And so this news story had just occurred. USA Today had made Rachel Levine their Woman of the Year. A biological man made Woman of the Year. And the Babylon Bee, we'll give out awards on occasion. Every year we make Trump our Christian of the Year, which is just ridiculous, And so we play with these ideas of giving out awards. So we thought, let's make Rachel Levine our Man of the Year. Well, that was a bridge too far for Twitter. And I got this text from my editor-in-chief about an hour after posting this joke. "You gonna get us banned from Twitter, bro, LOL." And sure enough, that's what happened. A couple days later, we got a notice from Twitter saying that if you want your account back, you need to, first of all, delete the joke, and then you need to check this box saying that you participated in hate speech and that you promise not to do it again. You will bend the knee, you will acknowledge that what you did was wrong if you want your account back. And, we had this moment where we thought, a lot of these tech companies, they collude with each other. If we get kicked off Twitter, we could get kicked off of all these programs or all these platforms, and we could lose our business. We could lose all our traffic. We could lose all our relevance in the culture. What do we do? We could just maybe let's just delete it, and we'll kind of laugh it off. We'll tell some jokes about it, and we'll move on. Let's just get our account back. Well, credit to our CEO, Seth Dillon. Within a few hours, he said, you know what? We're not going to delete this because the truth is too important. The truth is too important. Men are not women, and we are going to stand on the truth. And so we refused to delete the joke, even if it meant losing everything. And we didn't predict what was going to happen next. This was around my birthday 2 years ago. I was driving home from a date with my wife one night. After we'd gone on a nice birthday dinner, and I get a frantic call from my boss saying, "Hey, can you please go on Laura Ingraham with Fox News for me, in 10 minutes, because Elon Musk is about to call me." And so I said, okay. I'd had a few glasses of wine. I was a little bit, I don't know if I'm in good shape to go on Laura Ingraham, but okay, I'll do it. So I went on Laura Ingraham. And my boss talked to Elon Musk, who had just come back from Germany, opening up a new Tesla factory in Germany. And Elon Musk said, "What happened? Why did you guys lose your account on Twitter?" And we explained to him what happened. And you know the rest. The next day, Elon started to make moves to buy Twitter. And he purchased the site. All these things came out about how Twitter had been colluding with the government to censor speech and change the narrative and silence people that the government didn't agree with. There have been hearings in Washington about it. And now we have Twitter kind of as this free speech platform, this lone free speech platform among all the other social media platforms, because we refuse to delete a joke. I mean, it's amazing. Now, we never would have predicted that would have happened. But my point is that sometimes all it takes is one person. Chances are there are children of people in this room who will someday be placed in a situation where choosing to do the right thing could alter the course of history. Will they be ready to make the right decision? Will they have seen your example, and will it strengthen them to do the same? So, be an example. Stand on the truth, even if it costs you something. And then finally, and most importantly, support classical education. And this is the commercial part of the speech. The school board made me add this, and I'm just kidding. I added it on my own. It's very important. This is actually a really important part because we are facing an uphill battle in education. You look at what's going on in the public school system, it's a disaster. It really is. Whether it's critical theory, whether it's one of its offshoots, queer theory, that's sexualizing children at younger and younger ages, whether it's social emotional learning, that's a new buzzword, that seeks to deconstruct the moral conscience of a child, common sense, deconstruct the virtue taught by parents, strip away the humanity and individuality of a child, and replace it with unquestioning obedience to peer pressure, making children mindless cogs in a machine. One thing I appreciate about NOCA is they use books. You go to public school, they all get Chromebooks, laptops. Laptops run by Google. Think about that. All the web search results, the resources, the learning applications are controlled by a single radical progressive corporation in Mountain View, California. That's what we're up against. And here, among all of that, you have this tiny little upstart called NOCA trying to preserve a remnant of free thinkers and creators and truth tellers, and they're doing it without all the public funding that other schools get. They're doing it with about half of the funding that most public schools get. And that's why your participation and your support is so important here tonight. So I just want to encourage you, if you can, donate what you can, support however you can, whether it's volunteering, whether it's financially. I used to send my kids to a private school where, we were spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month on tuition. We get to send our kids to NOCA for free. If you can afford a few $100s a month to support this cause, I can't think of a more important thing than the future of our children and the future of our nation. So let's put our money where our mouth is and support it however we can. That's the end of the commercial. It's easy to look around us and be pessimistic. We are immersed in the absurdities of a rapidly decaying culture every day. But schools like this, parents and teachers like all of you, should give us hope. For each child that is brought up in wisdom and truth, you have not only raised someone who can carry the torch of freedom to future generations, but you have saved the entire world for that child. You have given him the keys to a life of joy. And as to that second question, what's next? Well, I may have oversold myself a little bit as a mystic prophet, but I at least know this: truth, goodness, and beauty never die. No matter how many times the world tries to kill them or suppress them, they will always come back. They will always reassert themselves. Truth will ultimately triumph over lies. Goodness will ultimately triumph over evil, and beauty will always outshine ugliness and depravity. It is inevitable, because it's a story that has played out since the creation, and it will continue to play out into the future. So whatever you're doing through NOCA, be it teaching, parenting, volunteering, or donating, you are giving our children a chance not just to play a part in that grand story, but to be the heroes of it. And beyond that, what's next is up to us. Thank you.